Hello, and thank you for inviting me to the Mises Caucus. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I thought I would send a little message by video. But I want to make sure that you understand that I am very pleased that you sent me the invitation, because I've really wanted to meet the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party. And I understand that the Mises Institute and the Mises Caucus knows something about liberty. If not, you better check whether or not you're allowed to use that word. But I have heard you will defend the principles of liberty, and we can do this any way that we can think of. Of course, I worked in the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party and made my effort. But what was the driving force, of course, was to promote the cause of liberty and the principles of liberty. So we can do it in all manners. You know, we talk a lot about labels, and it's come up, and even Mises and Hayek would talk about labels. They did not want to be called conservatives, and I think most of us who got moved along in the libertarian movement understand that. But you know, they generally preferred the term liberal. But there's been a systematic destruction of that term as well. Liberal means big government, big bad government. So not too many people want to use that. But it's a good term. Unfortunately, it's been destroyed. But also the word progressive. I always thought that was a neat word. I want to be progressive. I don't want to be locked down in the dark ages and backward looking. And people used to say to me, you want to go back to the dark ages of gold standard. No, I want to move to have a more modernized understanding of monetary policy and not go backwards. And that, to me, was progressive. Of course, progressive now means ultimate socialism. Bernie Sanders likes to be called a progressive, and it doesn't help us out. So we're left with the word libertarian, and generally this is acceptable pretty well. It hasn't been destroyed. There's been question. But while in Washington, a lot of people would come up to me, and in conversation, they would come up and want to reassure me that they were good guys. And they say, Ron, I'm a libertarian on this issue. They weren't libertarians, but on this issue, I'm a libertarian. But I've never heard anybody come up and say, okay, don't worry about me. I'm a socialist on this issue. Unfortunately, though, in the last several years, people have been bolder at using this term socialist. It's all over the campuses, and now they're using the word Marxism again, the cultural Marxist, not economic Marxism, but cultural Marxist. So it's a little bit disturbing that these terms are becoming more popularized. So I think it's important that we have a term. I think libertarian is a good term. We have to define it and know what it's all about so that we know what we're defending. Some people challenge us as libertarians, say, well, that's anarchy. You have no rules and no regulations. I tell them, you know, the marketplace is very, very tough on the rules. If you don't do well, you suffer the consequences. If you do well, you receive the benefits. And that means there are rules, and you don't get your bailouts if you don't do a good job. So this is a big difference. And there should be some basic rules. You can't have civilization without some rules. And you know, if you look at civilizations and cultures, and most great religions have come up with some basic rules that fit into the non-aggression principle. And so if you have a society that is completely opposite of a theocracy, because we don't want a theocracy, you have to have a general rules that have been endorsed by various religions. And that is, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't hurt people, and don't murder, don't kill people, and live up to your promises. That's a pretty simple case, and that's embedded in most religions, and certainly all the politicians in the world have a pretense that that is what they believe in. They don't believe in theft in order to redistribute wealth, but they believe in humanitarian redistribution of wealth to take care of the people who need help and who have been destroyed and damaged and made to suffer because of liberty. And that's why they have to counteract the problems of freedom and too much capitalism. That's going on, and that's, to me, is a great threat to us, because it is being threatened because the opposition, who are now starting to use the word you know, socialists and Marxism, they're the ones who are saying that the problems that we face all have come from capitalism and freedom. which is not true, because we've had a bit of free markets in our early history, but in the last 100 years there was systematic undermining of the principles of the free market, which endorses the principles of private property and voluntary contracts and working these problems out. But what has happened now is because the people have been convinced that all our problems today, the maldistribution of wealth, which is a big problem, that's that capitalism stuff. That's too many libertarians out there. We know we need libertarians to tell us when we are punishing too many people doing drugs, and we need them a little bit. But they go too far on this economic policy, and they go way too far, of course, on foreign policy, and that's why we have to rein them in. And therefore, the attack becomes too much freedom and too much capitalism. But they don't talk about crony capitalism. They don't talk about, the interventionism that favors the coalition between big business and government. And that is truly the threat. And Mises talks about it a lot. He talks about, if you get too much of that, it will morph over into a socialistic system, which he predicted would be more of a fascist socialist system. And if you look around, there's a lot of concerns that we should direct that way. But we can't win the fight against this totalitarian approach of big government. They have control of the education and the media and our foreign policy and all these things. We cannot win that unless we absolutely describe what a free market is like and why the problems that we have today come from too much government, and that we're dealing with crony capitalism. I don't even like the word capitalism. We talk about freedom of choice. And the only time I want to talk about democracy is in the marketplace. Just think of the voting done by buying and selling and sorting out the prices between two individuals. No, it never works out perfectly, but if it's done properly, both sides win and both sides are happy, and you don't have government fixing of prices. But where has government gone wrong is they have become the price fixers and the taxers. They tax through debasing the currency, and then they're always fixing prices once they control an item. They're involved in the fixing of prices of energy and medicine and the price of an education and making them extremely putting them extremely out of bounds. But where they really violate the principles of voluntarism in the market is the price fixing of money, the interest rates. The most important thing in a free market is free market pricing of the borrowing of money. But what we have had recently is the destruction of any incentive to save. Why save money? How is it easy to teach your kids to put away $1 a month and earn interest when it's 0.001. It destroys the whole principle of savings. It develops a tendency to depend on capital, your investment money from the Federal Reserve, and the only reason that is capital is because it steals from the people who have some real wealth. It dilutes the value of money. So we have embarked on a very bad system. The economic system is coming to an end. We cannot live with Keynesian economics and central banking and all this intervention. We cannot live with this foreign policy of being in all these countries. Did a program just yesterday on the fact that we're dropping 12 bombs a day around the world. So it goes on, and we can't live that way. And the fact is that because we've had, because we've had a central bank, what we've been able to do is print the gold, the pseudo-gold, the paper gold. People still use our dollar as the reserve currency of the world, which has given us license. Print money, spend it overseas, we get stuff, and they get dollars, and then they loan it back to us, and then we yell and scream it's all their fault for beating us in some competition. But it's pretty ironic that we are the wealthiest country in the world, still are, and that we have all these advantages of the reserve currency. We rig the currencies more than anybody else, and then we go and we start saying, oh, China, you're a currency manipulator, we're going to punish you. It doesn't work. We need to define what a free society is all about and why it's oriented around the principle of individual liberty, and then that goes into property rights and voluntarism, exchange of goods and services, and keep the government out. I want to close with just saying that one of my phrases I used when I ran for Congress, for Congress as well, ran for the presidency, and by the way, I didn't win. And this was a phrase I said, I want to be the president for the things I don't want to do. I don't want to run your life because I don't know how to run your life and I don't know what you want. I don't want to run the economy because I don't know how to run the economy and I don't have the authority to run the economy. And I don't want to police the world because I do not have the authority to do it, don't know exactly all the circumstances, and we shouldn't be doing it. So that is the offer. In that way, what I was presenting is something which is called negative. But believe me, it is doing nothing like that, which releases liberty and the creative and energetic attitude of individuals imperfectly. Believe me, having a system where we think we're going to send a few planners to Washington and sort all this out, believe me, it doesn't work. It's not working, and that's why we have this crisis going on, social, educational, economically crisis, because we have followed some rules that are absolutely wrong, and we had been introduced to some decent rules. We abandoned them 100 years ago. What we have to do is rethink this, and that is why the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party has a job on their hands to make sure that Libertarian Party represents the views of libertarianism. They stand up for these because we have to have something offered, because the current system is going to collapse and everything is ideological. It's not partisan. It's not political parties. That's secondary. They're vehicles. But eventually what we have to have replaces are different ideas, because we have pervasive ideas in Washington that endorse Keynesian economics, economic planning, intervention overseas, and all this mischief. We have to have an intellectual community that endorses individual liberty and property rights and voluntarism. Then I am convinced that we would have a much better world. Congratulations for being in the Mises Caucus. Keep up the good work and keep everybody honest.